Hello everyone, this is Jairia A. Abbas for ELE 137.
For this lesson, we are going to talk about contemporary, popular, and emergent literature and their interrelationship. This lesson or topic is basically a recapitulation of what the previous reporters have discussed because these have been already expounded and elaborated. But I am just going to give you a brief summary of the happenings of each period, specifically on its literature. Now let us start with the contemporary literature. Contemporary literature on 1940s to 1960s. Contemporary literature is a vast group of written works produced from a specific time in history through the current age. This literary era defines a time period, but it also describes a particular style and quality of writing. Some see this period as an extension of postmodern literature, but most refer to it as a literary era of its own. Basically, contemporary literature is also the modern literature in this age. Well, much of contemporary literature comes from the Western authors. However, the term is not synonymous with English or American literature. And this literary period can apply to written works from anywhere in the world. In fact, globalization opened the door to include contemporary works written by many literary figures in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. The genres included in this literary period spans a variety of writing forms in addition to novels and poetry. The flash fiction, the short stories, the slam poetries, plays, memoirs, and autobiographies can all be included in this category. The non-fiction is usually not classified as literature, but this era sometimes includes works of creative non-fiction which tell a story using literary techniques. The typical characteristics of the contemporary period includes reality-based stories with strong characters and a believable story. Settings usually keep to the current or modern era, so futuristic and science fiction novels are rarely included in this category. Well-defined, realistic, and highly developed characters are important in classifying a written work as contemporary, and most writing in this category features stories that are more character-driven instead or rather than plot-driven. Literature pieces or literature works that comes from the contemporary period are The Catcher in the Rye, 1950s, The Run in the Book that was established by John Updike as one of the major American novels, and Harry Robert. And then we also have The Beloved, the novel by Toni Morrison, published in 1987. Moving forward, we have the popular literature. The popular literature was in the 19th to 20th century. Basically, these are the literature pieces that was known globally. These are the kinds of stories that are literature, but are kind of popular literature that even young people or adults know. Examples of this are like the Cinderella, Snow White, or the stories such as Tarzan. Most illustrations or examples to illustrate the popular fiction does not necessarily mean the junk fiction or badly written prose. On the contrary, more or much of the literature that we have loved over the years is truly fine fiction and contains excellent writing. The sheer volume of the fiction that has been published like 200 years leads us sometimes to assume that if a work was enormously popular, it had to necessarily be inferior to. In this class, I will argue that key pieces of popular fiction are still both fun to read and important to literary study. So, how then, you might ask, do we distinguish between real literary fiction and popular fiction if some of the popular ones are also important literature? We can't really say that, or we can't really. To a large extent, there are overlaps and special cases and so forth in these classifications. But in general terms, we can always include in popular fiction works that can be categorized as the genre works, such as in fiction. No? You will note that our study curriculum is organized by genre. If a novel fits the criteria of horror, crime, detective, romance, western, science fiction, or fantasy, then we usually can include it in popular fiction, even if it also has all the traits of the literary fiction. Beyond the large-scale genres that we easily recognize, publishers also define genre books by very specific subgenres. The British novels, for instance, in which we never see the murder, are called the tea-cozy crime novels. But then, it all comes back to thinking that when does popular fiction begin, or when did it begin? The formal publishing category of the popular fiction began in the 19th century, a time when wider literacy and cheaper printing makes books available to middle and lower class readers. But if you look at the phenomena of popular stories, genre literature goes back to the earliest folk tales and continues in privately circulated manuscripts throughout history. We think of the example, we have the Tarzan. Tarzan as being a creature of the 20th century, the popular hero. No, still and always is, and still is, the concept of the wild man of the forest. It shows up in tales from our earliest beginnings. That's one of its examples. So we do know that stories which engage the attention of many people over time have always existed and continue to inspire popular literature. We have always been fascinated with romances, adventures, ghosts, and monsters and crimes. However, once the book became a part of entertainment options for the masses, though we had a flowering of new stories and themes, some of these themes, the science fiction aspects of such as Frankenstein, no, for example, it would not have been possible in the world before 1800s. The same is true of the cowboy or the western genres. It was rather new and unexplored territory of American expansion that gave rise to the legends and novels about punchers. And then around 1900s, after 1900s, when American literature came to be appreciated and American writers challenged the dominance of British writers in English, the categories and the differences between literature and dime fiction became the muddler. And also after 1900s, yung wider readership and better distribution of books encouraged the recognition of even more new movements, genres, and writers. If you're looking for some examples of this, you can try to read the story of the Jack the Ripper in the London Fog. The Jack and the Ripper in London Fog is an example of a popular literature which talks about the infamous murderer Jack the Ripper that killed at least 5 London female prostitutes in the 1888. No? He was never captured, but his identity is one of the English's most famous unsolved mysteries. Do you get it? Okay, let's move on. And now we have the last type or like the period of literature which is known as the Emergent literature. The Emergent literature is around 21st century up to present now. In the modern parlance, the term is associated with its academic context, referring to the enduring works of fiction, philosophy, history, and etc. that have been studied for generations and shape the foundations of our thought. Yet, literature by its definition includes any and all written works, a fact that has never been more relevant than in our current internet age, when the written word is more accessible and democratic than ever before. The death of print has been much heralded over the past decade, precipitated by the rising accessibility of devices like tablets and smartphones that have made the electronic medium cheaper and more universal. The book sales as well as the magazine and newspaper subscriptions have diminished, but our appetite for information has still grown larger and more impetuous. Moreover, the internet has made it possible for students to take non-traditional texts as to also revisit them so that they may analyze them. We are transcending the limitations of the print-based text into this incredible realm of possibility through advancing technology. Therefore, although literature has to change with society, the authors are still trying to address immutable human questions in new ways and reconcile them with the ever-changing technology that surrounds us. One of the examples of, or that came, the literature that came in the emergent literature is we have the La Tribulación d'un Casier, The Tribulations of the Cashier by Anna Sam, which is a sociological study of the grocery store world from the viewpoint of the checkout girl. Other works are like the indie film, which is known as The Spork. The Spork about a female identified intersex trying to deal with mean girls in junior high. And those are just one of the examples of it. If you wish to read it, there are around like stories online that are available also. That's all for the emergent literature. As you can probably tell or observe, there are this interrelationship of both the contemporary, the popular, and then the emergent literature because there are those periods of literature pieces that have some kind of epochs for how literature has evolved or developed over time. That would be all. If you have questions, please feel free to comment down your questions. That would be all. Thank you.